What does a country brook have to do with making disciples in the local church? We'll touch on that in just a moment. But I want to begin by welcoming you to this, our first edition of a short series of videos we're calling Discipleship Flow. In these series of videos, we want to provide you real help and hope and practical answers on making disciples in the local church. I'm Pastor Jeff Barbieri, and I have the privilege of planting a church right now in New Tripoli, Pennsylvania, and I've actually planted 4 disciple-making churches over the last 30 years. I'm also the Northeastern representative for the Institute for Training in Ministry, who's sponsoring these videos. Now, as we look at disciple-making across the landscape of America, there's 3 different approaches that you might recognize. The first is the haphazard approach. Now, in the haphazard approach, it might be in a good church. They might have great preaching in wonderful small groups, but what's missing is a organized plan approach to when someone new comes to Christ, how that little new baby is established, and how that new little Christian then is equipped to be a reproducing Christian, to witness in a natural way, and then to be a servant, and then for those who have the gift and the interest to emerge as leaders. If it happens, it kind of happens haphazardly. There's no organized plan. That's on one extreme of the philosophical grid. On the other extreme, it's what I call the all-on-board approach. And on the all-on-board approach, everyone in the church is encouraged and pressured to get involved in disciple making. There's a lot of good things to be said about this approach. The pastor, the church leaders attend a series of seminars. And in those seminars, they learn about the biblical principles, the biblical motivations, the biblical practices of making discipleship the core of the church. It's wonderful. However, after all the years, and I've been involved in those churches, I've pastored one, but what I would tell you is that approach works very well in a new church where there's not a lot of things in competition. But in an older church where there's a lot of programs and traditions, it takes a very, very gifted pastor to articulate and to navigate that kind of change. It's like trying to turn an ocean liner around in this little brook. Also, unfortunately, I found that sometimes people resent that kind of change. And sometimes the pastor is exhausted at the end of the process. And unfortunately, sometimes the church even splits. After all, Jesus never pigeonholed anyone in disciple making. He just invited people to come. And those that had the openness to come came and followed and he worked with them. And that brings us to the third approach that we call the disciple-making flow, hence our little brook. Here in the Lehigh Valley where we're located, this little brook is going to flow south out of the valley. It's going to meet with some other tributaries. It's going to become a widening stream and eventually a raging river. And that's the picture of disciple-making in your church. In your church, it can start without adding programs or expense, just you and one other person. You and a couple of leaders, you and your wife and another couple, maybe as many as 10 or 12 individuals in a small group. And there in that group, you establish those people. You say, well, they're older Christians, they're leaders. Don't assume they're established in the basics of the Christian life. Establish them so that they can also be reproductive. You establish them in the basics of the Christian life. You establish them and equip them in the ability to be reproducing, how to reach others, and how to establish those new believers. And then that second generation of believers is able to repeat that process. And before you know it, that little trickle that started with you and just one other guy or you and just one other couple, that little brook becomes a raging river. Now, I know that sounds like a long process. I know that that's a slow approach to growth. But I want to tell you, that kind of growth is solid growth. People are built. They're able to withstand the pressures of life and the challenges and trials of ministry. Also, that type of growth, the discipleship flow growth, doesn't require big bucks. It doesn't require programs. It doesn't require you to be the masterful CEO, agent of change. In fact, you've already been gifted. If you're a pastor, God's given you the ability, the gifts to shepherd and to teach. You've got all the gifts you need to start. You just need a plan. In upstate New York, where my sister lives, on a visit there, I was shocked as we were traveling over the interstate. We crossed over an interstate bridge, and I saw the sign that said the Hudson River. I was shocked because it was so narrow. It was narrow enough you could throw a stone across, throw a rock across it. It's a far cry from how the Hudson River looks when you flow 300 miles south into New York Harbor, where it's a massive raging river. Well, that's the picture I want to leave with you. If you start a ministry of discipleship flow, not today, not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually flowing out of your church, flowing through your church, can be a stream of effective evangelism and discipleship that washes through your church and goes into the community with the gospel of Jesus Christ. If the discipleship flow sounds interesting to you, I would encourage you to take 3 steps. Number 1, I would encourage you to go to the Institute for Training and Ministry's website, which is trainingandministry.com, and you'll see that on your screen. And there you could preview all the curriculum that the Institute for Training and Ministry has developed. Yes, we produce and sell curriculum, but it's not about money. I've been working with the Institute for Training and Ministry for almost 30 years, or about 30 years, since early in my ministry, in the early 1990s. And it's never been about money. It's about producing curriculum that's biblical, that's learner focused. The learner is involved in the curriculum, that's educationally sound, and that's sequential in scope. When you go to the website, you'll see that we have 18 courses that fall in one of 5 categories of ministry, ranging from basic discipleship all the way to pastoral ministry. Now, you wouldn't use all 18 courses, but you would craft a flow of disciple making that would cover 2 or 3 years that would move people strategically, sequentially, and develop them. So I'd encourage you to look at those samples. Secondly, I would encourage you to purchase our operations manual. This inexpensive paperback is worth its weight in platinum, and that will help clarify for you and motivate you regarding disciple making in the local church. It'll give you a little more insight about the iTIM, Institute for Training and Ministry curriculum. The later chapters on leading a small group and how adults learn and leading through change. I've gone back to this many times over the last 30 years of ministry. So I'd encourage you to get this. It's really a great resource. It'll also give you some other recommendations for reading on disciple making. And then finally, if I could be of help to you in any way, if I could help you with strategy or questions, please call me, email me. My information is there on the screen, or leave a question in the comments section, and I promise I'll get back to you. It will be my privilege to help you. And so as we move out from this first video, I would encourage you, if you found it helpful, to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. The next video that we're planning is called The Principle-Driven Church. And you will learn how understanding the principle-driven church is the foundation to having a balanced ministry and a balanced disciple making in your church. So I want to leave you just with a blessing from the Lord. May the Lord bless you as you serve him. And at the risk of sounding a little corny, may the flow be with you.